So you're going to hear a story today from a friend of mine, Mr. Ian Hockley, and you're going to meet in the coming weeks another friend of mine, Rob Armstrong, who is going to be here training our students. I've had the pleasure of working with them for the last couple of years. Like I said, wonderful gentlemen, great speakers with a powerful message. So if you would join me in welcoming our guest today, and I'll turn it over the microphone to Ian. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shagu. Thank you. Thank you for that greeting. It's good to see you. It's good to see you in person, right? Because we've had a couple of years, right? It's been different. It's been strange. So it's good to be back. Now, you're probably already thinking as I start talking, that is not a Connecticut accent. But I do live here. I live in the town of Monroe. It's about an hour's drive away, down past Route 8. And I grew up in a country where I played football when I was your age. But this is how we played football. A little bit differently. That's how we play football. And I know you play football, because I've been here since 2011. So I've been watching your football a good deal. Right. But if you call it soccer or I call it football, it's the same game. But it's also an analogy. A game of two halves. The first half can be going great. Right, the team's playing well, you score some goals, you go in at half-time, you're like, well, this is in the bag, we got this. And then you come out in the second half, and something goes wrong. Whether someone gets sent off, or the other team suddenly picks it up, but it becomes a disaster. And you're losing. And you look at each other and you're like, well, are we giving up? Are we going to turn this around? Are we going to make things great? And I take that analogy to my own life. Again, a life of two halves. The first half, I grew up in England, that's where I'm from, and I had a wonderful family, and they got me to college. I was one of the first in my family to go to college, and that got me a good job. And I got a good job, I met a wonderful woman, we started a family, and we had two fantastic boys, Jake and Dylan. That's Jake there in the red on the left, and Dylan in the blue. And then we were living in England, and then we got to move to the United States in 2011. And really, it was a dream come true, but it was also like coming home, because my parents had brought me here on vacation for years. Nicole, their mum, she was born in Rhode Island, and Jake's birthday is the 4th of July. And we moved to the beautiful village of Sandy Hook, and we start, it's like the American dream. But the end of the first half was on December 14th, 2012. And the second half started when Dylan, 6 years old, was one of the first graders that was killed in the shooting at Sandy Hook in 2012. 21st graders and 6 teachers. And that was that moment, like, everything falls apart. Everything's over. What do we do? But I've been able to look back now, we're 9 years on, and look back at all the wonderful things that helped me go on. That helped me set a new direction for my life, that helped me pull my socks up and say, we got this, we can do this, we can go forward. And I want to share some of those with you today, and then talk about, as Mr. Shagu said, the movement we're starting here at the Gilbert School. So, the tragedy at Newtown, the president came to our town and he held a vigil. He hosted a vigil at the high school, and we were in a room just like this. But it was full. And President Obama stood up on stage and he talked about the need for change. Now, he was talking about change and a problem in society about gun violence, but I wasn't hearing that. I was just hearing he said, we need change. We need change. And that word really stuck with me. But what was even more important is all of the families that were there that had lost a little child or a brother or sister were sat at the front. And we filled the first 3 rows. And whenever anybody would break down and cry with the emotion, this lady, who was sat right behind the president, would get up, and she'd just go along to them, she'd whisper things, hold their hand, she'd calm them down. And I was fascinated by this. And after the event, I went up and introduced myself. The lady was very kind. She said her name was Laura. She was with the federal response team. And she'd like to visit our family the next day. Absolutely, yes, please do. And the next day she did come. She came to our house. She sat down with Nicole and I, and we just shared all our happy memories of Dylan. He loved the color purple. He'd come home from preschool every day with a big sheet of paper covered in purple blobs. He was so happy. And we'd stick it on the refrigerator. He was fascinated by the moon, because it changed shape every night. He didn't know why. He was really afraid of the wind, because he could feel this thing, but he couldn't see it. He was 6 years old. He was struggling with his speech development. That's one of the ways that autism was affecting him. And when he got really excited, he would jump up and down, and he'd flap his hands. And Nicole told Laura this story. When Dylan was 5 years old, I think Jake and Dylan had been playing Mario Kart on Nintendo. And Dylan always wanted to beat Jake, but Jake was older, and he would always win. But this time Dylan won. And he got so excited, he's jumping up and down. He's flapping his hands. And Nicole says, Dylan, why do you flap? Now, she wasn't sure if he understood the question. He was struggling. Or if he even would care to answer. And he did. He said, Mummy, I'm a beautiful butterfly. And that stuck with us. And Laura said, that's interesting, because the butterfly is a symbol of transformation and change. The ugly caterpillar goes into its chrysalis and emerges this most beautiful thing in nature. Fragile, but resilient. The monarch butterflies migrate each year from New England to Mexico. That's 2,000 miles. That story stuck with us. Anyway, after the tragedy, there was so much kindness done to our town. I got a letter from a fire chief from New Jersey, just a long letter, and he explained how he and his team, after Hurricane Katrina, which was how many years ago now? 20 years? Before you were born. Hurricane Katrina had hit the South, and many states down there, the towns had just been devastated, flattened. And he and his team raised money and flew down there and went to towns that had been destroyed, and they built playgrounds. They built big, colorful playgrounds so that the kids would have somewhere to play, to be happy when all around them was devastated. And he wrote in this letter that he wanted to build 26 playgrounds up in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. One for each of the victims of Sandy. So each of the families contacted the fire chief, and they raised the money. They raised about $100,000, enough to build 3 playgrounds. And they built them. But then the people in those towns raised more money so that another town could have a playground. And then those towns raised money so another town could have a playground. Have you ever heard of paying it forward? When you receive a kindness, can you imagine that? These towns raising money for someone else because someone had done something good for them. Dylan's, it's down in Westport, Connecticut, right down on the coast. And it's purple, and it has butterflies in it. I remember back then, a lot of the major league teams actually came to Newtown. The New York Knicks came. The Red Bulls came. The Boston Bruins came, just to play games with the kids. Can you imagine the Boston Bruins playing floor hockey with kids your size? It was so wonderful, that kindness. But really, the pinnacle was when the NFL wanted the Sandy Hook Choir to go down and sing at the Super Bowl in New Orleans. Now, my oldest son Jake got to go with the choir. He was a 3rd grader. And the NFL chartered a plane, like a whole plane, put all the families on, flew us down, put us up in a hotel, and every day we got to go to the Superdome, and the kids got to rehearse. We got to watch the halftime show going through all its rehearsals. And the kids were in their little dressing room, and the day before the game, they got told that the superstars who were going to be performing, they'd get to meet them. Beyonce and Alicia Keys. You could see the kids like exploding. They're like, oh my God, this is, and they're sitting and they're waiting, and they're waiting, and they're waiting to be called, and there's a knock on the door. What's this? Open the door, and in she walks. They didn't have to go see her. She wasn't sitting in her dressing room. She came to them. And I only found this picture 2 weeks ago. I've never used this picture before. I found it. And it was just so wonderful to see her among them. Just being a mom. Just caring for these little kids. But then it's the day of the game. And the parents are there with the kids, in little white t-shirts and pants, and we're waiting in the tunnel, and the teams have already run onto the field. And the noise coming down the tunnel is just deafening. And this is such a well-orchestrated show, like you are told where to go and when to go, and suddenly someone says go, and the kids run into the middle, and they line up on the podium, and the parents are on the side, and suddenly I'm standing amongst the San Francisco 49ers. And the kids are out there singing with Jennifer Hudson. And these huge footballers are standing there with tears streaming down their face. And then the kids have sung, and they're running off the pitch. And someone took this picture of Jake. And he's waving at us, and Nicole and I are on the sidelines. And I showed this to him. Someone sends it to us. And I'm like, look at that. And he gets angry. He's like, how can I be happy? My brother died 2 months ago. How can I be happy? And I took this as a question, and I wanted to help him to understand it. And I'm like, Jake, okay, this is all the sadness. This is all the sadness you got in this hand. If that's all you got, that's going to drag you down. You got to get this hand. You've got to fill it up with all the happy things you can find in life. That'll be your balance. He's a senior in high school now, and he plays football, American football. And I still remind him of that to this day. Now, I know all this happened 9 years ago, and Dylan only lived for 6 short years. And you know I'd give anything to have him back. But what I regret most is that year to 18 months when I found out he had autism. Because also back then, it wasn't so well understood. You know, instead of giving him all the attention and care and support he needed, what did I do? I was kind of like, well, what does that mean? Is he ever going to play sports, instruments? What's school going to be like? What's going to happen here? He was 3 years old. Now, I'm happy I got over that, and we had a couple more years, and they were wonderful years. But it's made me reflect. What would you say to someone close to you, if you knew it was the last words you'd ever say? That tomorrow they'd be gone. Because there's always times in our life, right, that we're just not getting on with people. They're close to us, we love them, but it gets the end of the day and we've run out of all our kind words. They've had a bad day, we've had a bad day. We say things we don't mean to say. Think about those words you'd say to them. And then say them next time you see them. Because the great thing is you will have them for many, many years. But we really only understand how much people mean to us when they're gone. And we shouldn't lose a single day. So that word kept popping up time and time again. So with all the money that was donated, and people donated so much money to the victims in Newtown, we created a small charity, a small foundation. And we called it Dylan's Wings of Change. The butterfly, we wanted to remember him, Dylan the little butterfly, and change. And how could we create change? And we used that money, and we were making grants. We were giving that money to other organizations, helping kids get the best start in life. Kids with disabilities, kids who are struggling. Because money makes things happen. We spent all that money that was given, so we had to raise more. So we raised more money by running races. We got together huge teams of people, and we go running races all over the country. Because generous people donate to people who are putting the effort in. So I wasn't much of a runner back then, but I had to become one. I loved being part of these teams. And I remember in 2017, I got to run the New York Marathon. And that's 26 miles. And I'd never run a marathon, but I was told that there's going to be 50,000 people in this race, and there's going to be 1 million people on the streets of New York City. So put a name on the front of your shirt, and they'll call your name when they see you running down the road. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to put Ian. I don't know if people even pronounce it right. Ian? Yeah, is it? So I put Dylan. Well, I thought maybe, someone will call his name out. That would cheer me up. I wasn't prepared as I hit the streets of Brooklyn. Every 15 seconds, Dylan, go on, Dylan, you got this, Dylan. And I get to mile 20, and it's getting hard, and I'm tired, and my knees, and everything is hurting, and I want to walk. And people are just like, come on, Dylan, you can finish. People I didn't know, would never see again, cheering me on, getting me across the finish line. It was a wonderful experience. That pushed me further. I attempted a 100-mile race. This was a couple of years ago. My buddy Phil down in North Carolina. We didn't finish. 62 miles. Went back last year. Tried again. 62 miles. It was a loop. So 12 miles at a time. So you could only get so far. After the second attempt, I'm like, that's it, Phil. We failed. He's like, you are kidding, right? We didn't fail. We may have failed to run 100, but we ran 62 miles. How incredible is that? And that gave me a perspective. You know what? Sometimes you set your target up there, right up there. It doesn't matter if you don't quite reach it, because you'll be amazed at how far you can go. I got back into that race next April, and I am going to finish it. I'm going to finish it. But this isn't about me running races. Anyone can do that with enough training. Because there's another race we're all in. And there's people dropping out of this race. They're not making it to the finish line. It's the human race. We're in an epidemic. Yeah, I know we're in the COVID pandemic. But we've been in this epidemic for years, decades. This epidemic of social isolation, loneliness, disconnection. People who can't find friends. They have no support network. And this epidemic is killing people. Because when people are alone and have no support, it leads them to dark places. And when they can't find their way out, they might hurt themselves, hurt other people, kill themselves. This is real. This is happening. But I'd like to think there's an antidote. The antidote is empathy. Right? That ability to understand how someone is feeling. Maybe you've been through it. Also to have the courage to reach out and support and help that person. Sounds easy to say it, right? But if it's so easy, then why? Why are we struggling with it right now? Why have we been struggling with this these past few years? I have a perspective on this as well. I think we're in a revolution. Another revolution. A revolution is a time of massive change, of upheaval of everything that you think you know and understand, and you're lost. Hundreds of years ago, it was the Industrial Revolution. People who worked at home, they might have been a carpenter, a tailor, suddenly had to move to a big city, work in a big factory. They had to leave everything behind that they knew, and life changed for them completely. And then roll forward. Come forward the 1970s, 1980s. I know it's still history to you. That's when I was growing up. And suddenly there are computers. And information is king. And you kind of lose control of your essential self because everybody else seems to know more about you than you do. And then fast forward to today, when most of us have these, or some form of these. And so that information is coming at us 24/7. And if we're not careful, it's filling us up. We're in overload. And you know what? And then it comes out of our thumbs, back out into the world, exactly how we're feeling that day. And it'd be great if it was always positive and uplifting, but for some reason it does not seem to be. We are in the middle of an emotional revolution. Because people seem to be losing their ability to be good human beings. And it's unforgivable in adults because we should know better. And you're growing up into this world. This is like the air you breathe. I'm not down on social media. It's the users that are the problem. So if this is the air you breathe, if this is the environment you live in, how do you decide how to respond to it? You look at those around you. Celebrities, politicians, adults. So who can really blame you? Who can really blame those people? So we come to Wingman. It was about 2015, and we've been doing our programs and giving the money, and then I met 2 athletics coaches in Middlebury, not far from here, just down the bottom of Route 8. And in their athletics program, they had fun games and activities that their athletes did before training, in training, after training. And they had built this team of kids from 6 or 8 different towns that supported each other, looked out for each other, and were really successful as well. Kids were going to nationals. Kids were going to Olympic trials. And we got together with them, and the foundation said, we'll help you make a program, because that's what you do when you want to grow something. We called it Wingman, straight from the start. In the Air Force, your wingman it's the pilot that's got your back. It's looking out for you. It's keeping you safe. Wouldn't that be great if that was what the program was about? We wanted something to symbolize it that would be powerful, something superhero, but we wanted the butterfly, because this is about change. We ran it in their athletics program. They loved it. A local school asked us to start it. We started working with the teachers, taking those games and activities in the classroom. It lasted 3 months. We had to stop. It failed. Too much workload on the teachers. They were having to deal with everything they had to deal with classroom and academics and all the training they had to do. So we stopped. And we went to a couple of middle schools. And in those middle schools, the students told us, we'll run this program. We can do this. We needed to train them. So we brought in experts, Mr. Rob, other of our trainers. And they brought into the program so many more games and activities that became the core of what we do. It's called experiential learning. I won't bore you with all that. But we as humans learn best, not necessarily when we just sat down listening, but when we're moving, we're physically engaged, mentally challenged, stirring our emotions. It proved to be extremely effective for helping people forge bonds and connections with each other. It may seem like games when you're part of the program, but there's always a chance afterwards to reflect and think what happened there. How did I act? How did we interact? What just happened there? And that's for me one of the most powerful things is we don't have an, okay, today's activity is about respect, kindness. No, it's an experience. And whatever happens is what the group gets to talk about. We have activities where the teams are talking about success, teamwork, cooperation, communication, but that self-same activity in the same room with another group could have experienced frustration and anger and mean words, but it was real. And the students get to talk it out and express their emotions. And I think that's the power of the program. But maybe even more importantly, it's about student voice. It's about the sort of school you want to go to. It's about the kind of experience you want to have at middle school, at high school. And when we ask the students to describe their ideal school, the world they want to live in, and they're actually like, you're asking me? And they find their words. And that empowers people to make change. There's an activity we do in the training. I'll touch on that. So, as a leader of the program, you get training. 2 full days of training. And the first day, you get to experience the program, all of it. So many activities. And you as a group of leaders will bond and connect with each other. You'll see the power of the program. And then later in the year, you get to take the program out to other students. But as part of the training, we ask some essential questions. What is leadership? What does empathy look like? What behaviors do you want to change? What behaviors in adults don't you like? To be fair, we're changing this to how can we help adults be better people? That student voice creates change. Because let's face it, how many students in your school? Hundreds. How many staff? A few dozen. You're the majority here. You have that power to make change. So another thing that Laura talked to us about back in 2012 is something called the butterfly effect. And in chaos theory, scientifically, many small changes will accumulate and will throw a scientific model off and your results are useless. But I think it's more beautiful to say the butterfly flaps its wings, sets off a chain reaction that can cause a hurricane. That ripples will spread out from every small act, deed, word that you say and do. You know, Dylan, at his essence, just wanted to be happy. He struggled to communicate. We could understand him. But he wanted to be happy. And if you were not happy, for whatever reason, he'd just come up, put his head on one side, just say, "Why sad?" He'd try and cheer you up. And he only needed a little more help. A little more help, and he could do the things that any kid could do, that any of us could do. But isn't that the same of all of us? We all have those days when we're a bit down. We just need someone to check in with us. We need some help. We're afraid to ask. What if there were that person who had that courage to say, "I saw you. Are you okay? What can I do for you?" Because if you talk about the butterfly effect and the ripples spreading out, what would be the impact in your school if everybody came in one day and said, "You know, today I'm going to pick someone up, not put them down. That today I'm going to make the world a better place for one other person." Can you imagine what that kind of school would be like if everybody had that goal? What it is here. Stop. Try again. So cool. That's 650 middle schoolers. Right? And that was a few years ago. So the butterfly effect tells us when we build community, we do amazing things. When we come together, we're so much stronger than when we're apart. That it just takes one kind word to change someone's day. And that person you reach out to and help that day, reaching out to another person, truly the butterfly effect. And the last thing, I kept saying program. It was a couple of years ago and some students told us, Don't use that word. Programs are for prisons. We don't want to be in a program. We want to be in a movement, because that's something people want to join. And you're joining a movement that's now in 25 school districts across Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. So hopefully by the end of this year, there's 6,000 to 7,000 students who are back part of this movement and growing. Thank you for having me here today, hearing my story, learning a little about the movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So, next steps. Where do we go from here, right? So, we heard about the movement, the butterfly effect, making our school, the Gilbert School, the best place it can be. Turning the Gilbert School from a good school to a great school. We have the power to do that. We're going to be asking for your help. In the coming weeks, months, we're going to be looking for people that want to get involved in this movement. If you see yourself as a leader, or you want to be a leader, but don't really know what that means, if you want to be a part of this and making our school a better place for your class and future classes, understand that this isn't something that's a one and done program, that we're just going to have an assembly today and be done, right? We are making an investment of time. We're making an investment in philosophy. We're making an investment, obviously, in money to make the Gilbert School the best place it can be, so we all can leave here with the fondest of memories. So in the coming weeks, I want you to leave today, a couple things. I want you to go home tonight after school. Hopefully you were moved by the presentation, understand what we're trying to do. Bring your parents back. 6:30 right here tonight. Say, Mom, Dad, you gotta come hear Ian speak. Wonderful speaker with a powerful message. Bring them back. We know your lives are busy, but we want to have as many parents here tonight so they too understand what we're trying to do at the Gilbert School. So in the coming weeks, I want you to think about this. If you have more questions, my door is always open for you. My email, you can write me an email. We want to encourage more email writing. And I'll also be reaching out to our teachers to get their input and to see who they think would be leaders. My goal is, if we could, I know we can't because of the pandemic, is to put all of us, every student at the Gilbert School here, and our student leaders on the stage. And hopefully, every one of our students here can identify with at least one leader. We're not looking for all the jocks. We're not looking for all the, certain type. We're trying to get a cross-section of students that we all can identify with. Okay? So that concludes our programming today. Thank you very much. You were wonderful as I expected. I appreciate it. We're going back to period 2 right now. Thanks very much. Have a great day.